My wife made me pay for everything on our trip. On our honeymoon, my wife tore up my passport. She said she wouldn't travel with me, but would go with her dad instead. I agreed. A week later, she called me and confessed. She looked scared and pale. So, armed with evidence of the embezzlement, I went to the company. Even though they were supposed to be on their honeymoon, my colleagues were shocked to see me in the office as everyone bombarded me with questions about why I was at work instead of on my honeymoon. I decided I had nothing to hide. I explained that my wife and father-in-law had gone on the honeymoon instead, that my passport was destroyed, and that I had paid for the entire trip. My colleagues, bosses, and superiors were shocked and furious on my behalf. I thanked them for their concern and headed to the executive area of the company. What my colleagues didn't know was that one of the top executives at the company is my aunt. I never mentioned this to anyone, not even my wife or father-in-law. I didn't want people to think I got the job because of family connections, so I applied and secured the position based on my own merit. Since my aunt isn't involved in human resources, I asked her not to reveal our relationship before the orientation. Though surprised, she respected my decision and assured me that we would maintain a professional relationship at work. As a child, my aunt treated me like her own, showering me with love and indulging my wishes. We even went on trips together when I was younger, despite my parents scolding me for asking her to buy me things. She adored me. Since joining the company, our paths rarely crossed except for a brief exchange during orientation when I visited her office. My aunt's warm smile quickly faded as she sensed something was wrong. "Why are you here? Weren't you supposed to be on your honeymoon?" Seeing her familiar face, I couldn't hold back my tears. Through sobs, I told her everything that had happened. She was visibly furious, a side of her I had never seen before. I explained my wife's embezzlement and handed over the evidence. My aunt promised to hold a board meeting immediately to address the situation. After promising to address the situation, my aunt asked about my plans for the day. When I mentioned heading home, she suggested we grab some food together before she dropped me off. Despite the unbelievable betrayal I had experienced, I felt genuinely grateful for the warm-hearted people in my life who cared for me. A week later, when my wife and father-in-law returned from what was supposed to be our honeymoon, I received an immediate call. My wife was curious why I hadn't picked them up from the airport or cleaned the house as instructed. She demanded to know where I was. With the support of my aunt and parents, I had already hired a top divorce lawyer, and the process was underway. Without giving my wife a chance to speak, I said firmly, "You two are loud and annoying. I don't want to hear your voices anymore. Why would I pick up someone I'm divorcing, and why would I follow your orders to clean?" She was momentarily stunned but quickly resumed her ranting. "Do you think it's okay to speak to me like that? I did you a favor by marrying you. If I divorce you, you'll never find someone else. My dad's furious too. If you come back now and cook for us, I might forgive you. We're tired of foreign food. Make us some traditional meals." Her words were shocking. After her scheme with the embezzlement and going on a trip with her dad, I saw her true colors. It dawned on me that I had never truly known her. I had been reflecting on this realization for the past few days. I had already consulted a lawyer about our divorce. Please discuss any related matters with them. Divorce? What are you talking about? We're not getting a divorce. I heard her dad in the background shouting for her to hand him the phone and calling me names. Well, do as you please. By the way, I informed the company about your embezzlement. I think they'll be calling you in soon. Maybe you should get a lawyer too. Bye. I sensed her panic on the other end, but it wasn't my problem anymore. She kept calling, so I just blocked her number. My aunt knew our honeymoon dates, so right after our call, the company summoned my wife with the evidence I provided. They verified the information and confirmed the discrepancies in the payments. It turned out the amount my wife embezzled was huge. In front of the company's executives, my wife desperately tried to defend herself. She made up a story claiming I was the real embezzler, and she had tried to stop me. At that point, my aunt couldn't hold back and shouted, "My nephew would never do such a thing. We've confirmed that you and your father committed the embezzlement. You're lucky we haven't involved the police yet." Realizing her scheme had unraveled and that I had connections in senior management, my wife looked defeated. That day, I went to the company to return the wedding gifts to my colleagues. Despite our marriage ending so soon after the wedding, they all refused to take them back, saying they were given with heartfelt blessings. Surrounded by their warmth, my wife approached me looking desperate. "Why didn't you tell me about your family connection? I'm sorry, truly. Can we start over? Can you ask your aunt to let me stay in the company and make the embezzlement charges disappear?" Disgusted, I replied, "Do you even hear yourself? Are you serious? Divorce is the only way forward now. Reflect on your actions and face the consequences." After I pushed her away, my colleagues intervened and called security, who removed her from the premises. She was immediately fired. As for the embezzlement, the company is pursuing damages from her. Upon learning about the situation, my father-in-law attempted to contact my family repeatedly. However, after consulting my sensible mother-in-law, the call ceased. I had always wondered why my mother-in-law had agreed to our honeymoon, but when she came to apologize later, admitting her mistake, it became clear. She had believed my father-in-law was going on a domestic trip with his friends. She was looking forward to a peaceful week without him constantly nagging about shopping and dining out, hoping for a brief respite. When I returned home after learning about the ridiculous actions of my wife and father-in-law, my mother-in-law agreed that I should go back to my parents' home and help me pack. Emotions were running high, and without much discussion, I left for my family home. I knew my mother-in-law, being genuine, kind, and rational, would have stopped everything if she had known. She was the only reasonable person I could trust in that house. Although I was the victim, it was incredibly embarrassing to think my honeymoon had been hijacked by my father-in-law. I even considered resigning from my job. My parents advised me to take a break from work for a while. However, my aunt suggested that working might help distract me, and she discussed it with the CEO. They arranged for me to be transferred to a branch office. The divorce process with my wife went surprisingly smoothly, thanks to an excellent lawyer. However, I later found out my mother-in-law was involved when we were planning our wedding and discussing expenses. It turned out my wife had almost no savings. My in-laws were just an average working-class family. With my father-in-law's spending habits, they had little savings. My mother-in-law mentioned with a resigned smile that the alimony I received, considering our short marriage, was surprisingly substantial. Shockingly, my mother-in-law sold a family home to cover it. Their home wasn't in a city center, but in a close-knit community. When we got married, my father-in-law invited the neighbors. They witnessed me returning to the family home on the day I was supposed to be leaving for our honeymoon. Luggage in hand, with the neighborhood's penchant for gossip, rumors spread like wildfire. Over time, these rumors became exaggerated to the point where living in that area became unbearable. Initially, my father-in-law, always concerned about appearances, approved of our marriage because both my wife and I worked for prestigious companies. Having his daughter and son-in-law working for a major company was a status symbol for him. However, with rumors swirling due to his actions, he likely couldn't bear to stay in that house. Additionally, my mother-in-law probably felt responsible for covering the damages from my wife's embezzlement. While I harbor nothing but disdain for both my wife and father-in-law, I genuinely feel sorry for my mother-in-law. After being fired in order to pay damages, my wife apparently suffered a mental breakdown, unable to work. She's been moping around in a small apartment she moved to. Seeing her daughter so downcast, my father-in-law also became reclusive, as my mother-in-law told me. In fact, my mother-in-law, fed up with my father-in-law, was considering divorce as she didn't want to spend her later years with him. She asked if I could introduce her to the lawyer I had used. I immediately contacted my aunt, who got in touch with the lawyer. It might take some time, but I hope my mother-in-law can live the life she wishes. Thanks to the intervention of the company's CEO and my aunt, I was transferred to a branch office where I'm surrounded by supportive colleagues and superiors. I'm eternally grateful to my aunt. The only regret I have is missing out on the country we plan to visit for our honeymoon. Once things settle down, I hope to take a relaxed trip abroad.